I went to the woods when I was 21. In fact, August 19th, 1984, was the day that I left my job, my apartment, the city I grew up in, and my family and friends behind so that I could pursue my childhood dreams of living my life in a cabin in the woods. I built that cabin when I was 18, with the help of a friend that knew next to nothing about carpentry work, and I even knew less. But for two young guys with a cheap McCulloch chainsaw, some green hemlock lumber, and more ambition than education, I have to admit that it really didn't come out too bad. After the shell was up and watertight, I finished the cabin by myself, and there in August of my 21st year, I found myself standing on the threshold of my dreams as my little rough sawn cabin became my home, and my childhood dream was a dream no longer. You know, when I look back on those days in my first cabin, I do so with such incredibly fond memories of those times. And even though I'm in a much better position now, I own a lot of real estate, financially secure and all of that, and back then, I was really struggling sometimes. But yet, I still regard those times as the best days of my life. I think the reason being is because that was the first of my childhood dreams that I had conquered, and a major one at that. You know, I was 17 years old when I bought that property. I bought the land, I built the cabin, and there I was living in a cabin in the woods. And that was something that I had dreamed about all growing up, you know. And here it was, I was 21 years old and living the dream. And it was tremendous, just a tremendous accomplishment for someone so young. When we're children, we all visualize what we're going to be like when we grow up, you know. And I remember being with my friends, and one would say, oh, I'm going to be a policeman, I'm going to be a fireman, you know, I'm going to fly helicopters in the Air Force, I'm going to be on a warship, whatever. And my dreams were always the same from day one. I just wanted to live in a cabin in the woods, be an accomplished artist, be an accomplished trapper, live off the land, live unstructured. Me in 40-hour weeks just never went well. It was really hard for me to structure my life in such a way to have society, or however you want to label it, have so much control over the way that I live my life, you know, like 5 days a week. You are going to go here between this time, and it just never worked for me. You know, I've had plenty of jobs in my time, but boy, it just never worked for me. And it was same way when I was in school. I barely ever went to school when I was a kid. I'm so surprised I have the vocabulary I do and the business sense that I do. But, you know, I boil it all down to ambition, and in my book, ambition trumps education, and by far. So I know a lot of people that have degrees and all of that, but they dream of having a cabin in the woods, you know. They make a lot more money than I do. They have all these degrees, and they still don't have a cabin in the woods, you know, and I got two of them. So I'll just never understand it. I entered my first winter there with an equal dose of fear and excitement. And even though I had been on my own since I was barely 16, I had always had roommates that I shared apartments with. And this was the first time that I was truly alone, and in a whole new world where I didn't have any friends or family close by. When I first moved in, I was checking off the calendar day by day, and I remember writing in my journals, 2 weeks alone in the woods, you know, 30 days alone in the woods. And then when it finally reached like 6 months alone in the woods, it was like a major milestone, you know. It was really, really cool. It's fun to look back on it and read my journals. Sometimes I wasn't even sure where my next meal was going to come from, and I did a lot of foraging, ate a lot of frog legs, crawdads, a lot of rice and animals. Rice and animals, I gotta tell you, I ate a lot of that.
My new life had turned out to be all that I had hoped it would be. Adventure replaced routine, and I always found my backcountry foragings to be much more enjoyable and rewarding than those mindless fumblings in the grocery aisle. My existence was supported primarily from the meat and fur that I harvested, and I depended upon it. I ate a lot of venison and fish and fowl and crawdads and cooked it all on my Coleman stove. It gave me a tremendous sense of pride to be living life in the manner that I had spent my entire childhood dreaming about. My dream had been conquered, and this accomplishment certainly set the momentum for the days to follow.
My childhood dreams is what brought me to buying land and building a cabin and then eventually living there. But during that 5.5 years that I lived in that cabin, I never stopped dreaming. And I fulfilled a lot of my dreams and wants and wishes while living there. But my dreams took me further to the north, and I always wanted to see the Yukon and British Columbia and Alaska. And I knew I wouldn't be able to obtain those dreams without some sacrifice taking place. So after 5.5 years, I did a little soul searching and came to the realization that I'd never be able to conquer those dreams without having the capital to do so. And the only way for me to do that would to be selling my cabin. So I did.
Selling my cabin was the ultimate sacrifice, but it enabled me to chase my dreams to the north without financial burden or worry. I bought a new Toyota, built a camper for it, and hit the highway with a friend who needed a one-way ticket to the last frontier. I got to see the Yukon and British Columbia and all the places I wanted to see. I ate a lot of salmon and clams and forage during my journey. And after several months of foolishness, I headed down to Montana and got to see what the upper part of the U.S. was like. I finally settled back in New Hampshire and built another cabin to the trapper-style design I had fallen in love with during my travels in the north.
Well, throw that frisbee. You got a border collie around, you got to learn how to throw a frisbee left-handed, right-handed, overhand, underhand, every way, because they're non-stop. He's a good boy, though.
After getting the house built and settled down from all my travels, I plunged headfirst into my art and pursued that profession with a vengeance. I seesawed back and forth between being a pencil artist and a carpenter until my art profession became self-propelled with a strong following of collectors and a steady stream of income from my wholesale accounts and contest winnings.
That period of my life was certainly my glory days. I started out as a nobody, but once again, persistence paid off, and my dream of becoming an accomplished artist had materialized. Life was full speed ahead, I'll tell you. I'd be exhibiting in Maryland one weekend, and then Hartford, Connecticut the next, and in Portland, Maine, and Stowe, Vermont, and all over New Hampshire. That was a really cool time of my life, because there I was, the boy that was once doing his drawings by the light of a Coleman lantern, was now hanging out with some of the top label artists that I always admired, and they were buying me drinks, It was the coolest thing. It was a real cool time of my life.
I lived in that house and pursued my artist career for 13 years, until one day on March 30th, 2005, I lost my home to a horrific fire. All possessions were lost in the blink of an eye, and I was awakened to the harsh reality that you just never know what life is going to throw at you.
After going through an experience like that, I felt very displaced for a while. Just kind of lost, really. I'd go to put on my favorite shirt, or a pair of jeans, or something like that, and be continually reminded that I didn't have those things anymore. What possessions I owned were what I kept in my studio, which was a separate building, but everything in the house was destroyed. It was really quite a time. After a brief stay in a hotel, I headed to northern New York to where I had a little deer camp, and I had at least some familiar clothes that I could put on. I did a little soul searching there and just decided it was time for a major life change. And I retired from the art profession. At that time, I had almost 200 wholesale accounts and 3 sales reps working for me. And I closed all the accounts, retired from the art profession, moved to my cabin and bought up a bunch of acreage that surrounded my place. I started out with 28 acres, and it was a pipe dream for me as a New Hampshire boy to own 100 acres. And I say pipe dream because it just really wasn't realistic in New Hampshire unless you were very wealthy. But when I came to New York, I made a bunch of offers to the property owners that abutted my 28 acres, and I pieced together 293 acres, which was almost 3 times my pipe dream. So that was really cool. And then I established a trap line, and here I am today now. You know, I could have sat on my hands there and cried the boo-hoos for a while, but that's really just not me, and I always try to squeeze out a positive out of a negative. So I sold off the 4 3/4 acres that the house was on after it burnt. And when I came to New York, I had some capital and some money left over from the insurance, and I bought up all the acreage that I have. And it's just the way I've always lived my life. You know, I try and use all my experiences as a stepping stone instead of an anchor. I don't like things dragging me down. And I always try to squeeze a positive out of a negative, no matter what the situation may be. And that's what I did there.
I started this project with an abandoned Amish homestead that had been vacant for 24 years. I bought the house and barn and 28 acres for a mere 18 grand, and that purchase is a story in itself that I'll save for another day. I did a full restoration and popped out a few additions and then finished the place with lumber and stone I harvested from the property. And until I get a wild hair and move on, this is where I'll call home.
So here I am now in New York, and I've got a heck of a trap line established, and I no longer have to go to work every day, and I scratch out a living in many different ways, and I still sell some art. People still go to my little website that I have, and they still buy prints, and I sell at festivals and this and that, and I make my money from the fur, and I buy and sell property, and I do a bunch of little things to scratch out a living. But I guess the moral of the story here, folks, is your dreams and desires are a lot easier to conquer than you realize. The key to it is you got to move in the direction of your dreams. And so many people don't. They look at the big picture and get overwhelmed by it and then just say, well, let's take a cabin in the woods, for instance. Most of the people that watch my channel dream of owning a cabin in the woods. And maybe they'll pick up a real estate guide once or twice and look at property, didn't see anything they could afford, and just go, well, I can't afford it, and it's end of story, and they put the dream to rest. You know, the old adage is true, folks. Keep doing what you're doing, keep getting what you're getting, because life is what you make of it. Your dreams will never come looking to you for fulfillment, so it's up to you to take the initiative if you want to conquer them. The journey of 1,000 miles began with a single step. Just lose the need for instant gratification, work towards what you want, and you will find success a lot sooner than you think. So I hope you find this video to be inspirational, and I wish you all the very best of luck with your pursuit of your dreams. All the best, and God bless.